Imagine walking across a vast, icy land bridge, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the air bites with chilling cold. This isn't just a tale of survival, it's the story of how humans first set foot on the American continent 30,000 years ago. But how did they survive such a brutal environment? Why did they embark on such a journey? And what traces did they leave behind? To understand the deeper history of the United States, we must go back, far beyond 1776, to the very beginnings of human migration into this land. Even though the United States of America emerged as an independent country in 1776 and was officially recognized in 1783, the history of these lands runs much deeper. Thousands of years ago, the first people settled on the American continent. It is not entirely known how the Native Americans first arrived in these territories, but one theory suggests that people migrated from Eurasia around 30,000 years ago across a land bridge known as Beringia. This bridge connected Siberia to North America during the Ice Age. This migration continued until about 10,000 years ago when a glacial period ended, and rising ocean levels submerged the land bridge. The early inhabitants, known as Paleo-Americans, eventually migrated deeper into the Americas, forming tribes and nations. These groups created fascinating civilizations, each with its unique culture. Among these were the Adena culture, Iroquois culture, Coles Creek culture, Pueblo culture, and Mississippian culture. Another part of what is now the United States, Hawaii, has a distinct history. This land was not inhabited until the early centuries AD, when Polynesian settlers arrived between the 1st and 10th centuries. Native development flourished, with the Polynesians shaping Hawaii's early culture. Starting in the 15th century, European colonization began. In 1492, a Spanish expedition led by an Italian explorer sailed west in search of a new trade route to Asia, but landed in what came to be known as the New World. Over the next several decades, more ships arrived, establishing colonies and trade posts. The Spanish built their American empire using islands such as Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola as bases, eventually expanding significantly. France established colonies in eastern North America, parts of the Caribbean, and small sections of South America. Portugal colonized Brazil. Meanwhile, the eastern seaboard of what is now the United States was primarily settled by English colonists in the 17th century, alongside smaller numbers of Dutch and Swedish settlers. The first successful English colony, Jamestown, was founded in 1607 on the James River in Virginia. By the late 17th century, new settlers arrived, fueling the growth of commercial agriculture, particularly tobacco farming. Despite occasional conflicts with Native Americans, the colonies expanded rapidly, attracting more and more settlers. Each of the 13 American colonies developed slightly different governmental structures. In general, colonies were governed by officials appointed from England, but locally elected legislatures had some authority, such as voting on taxes and making laws. By the 18th century, the American colonies were growing rapidly. Low death rates, combined with abundant land and food, attracted waves of immigrants. The agricultural economy, particularly tobacco and rice plantations, relied heavily on enslaved African labor, imported from British colonies in the West Indies. By the 1770s, enslaved Africans made up about 1/5 of the population in the colonies. At this time, the idea of independence from Britain had not yet gained traction, as the colonies still depended on British military support to counter French and Spanish threats. However, this began to change after the French and Indian War, a part of the larger 7 Years' War. Britain's victory over France in this conflict came at a steep cost, leaving the British government in need of revenue. In 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, imposing taxes on the colonies without their approval through local legislatures. This sparked a heated debate. Did Parliament have the right to tax Americans who had no representation in it? The colonies resoundingly protested under the rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," and refused to pay. Tensions escalated in the late 1760s and early 1770s, culminating in the Boston Tea Party of 1773. Colonists, angered by a new tax on tea, staged a dramatic protest by dumping British tea into Boston Harbor. In response, Parliament enacted the Coercive Acts, which stripped Massachusetts of self-governance and placed it under military rule. This galvanized resistance throughout the 13 colonies. Leaders from across the colonies convened to form the First Continental Congress, which organized boycotts of British goods and issued a list of grievances to the king. At this stage, the goal was still not independence, but reform. When these appeals failed, A Second Continental Congress was established in 1775 to coordinate defense efforts. The colonies' rebellion began in earnest in 1775, and in 1776, they declared their independence, forming the United States of America. During the Revolutionary War, which spanned from 1775 to 1783, American forces achieved a crucial victory by capturing the British invasion army at Saratoga in 1777. This success convinced France to form a military alliance with the Americans, bringing in additional support from Spain and the Netherlands. With Britain lacking allies, the Americans were able to turn the tide of the war. General George Washington played a key role as a skilled leader and strategist. He worked closely with Congress and state governments, selected capable officers, trained troops, and maintained the ideals of a Republican army. The revolution ended in victory, with the Peace of Paris in 1783 recognizing American independence. The former colonies gained more land than anticipated, setting the stage for westward expansion. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson brokered the Louisiana Purchase, doubling the size of the United States. Initially, American diplomats were authorized to spend up to $10 million to acquire New Orleans and the west bank of the Mississippi River. However, the French offered to sell the entire Louisiana territory for just $5 million more, a deal that Jefferson quickly approved. By the mid-19th century, the United States continued its territorial growth. Texas joined the Union in 1845, and after a war with Mexico, the country acquired even more land, further extending its borders. In 1861, after Abraham Lincoln was elected president, the nation faced a deep crisis. Several southern states, opposed to his anti-slavery stance, seceded and formed the Confederacy. This conflict erupted into the Civil War when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in April 1861. After 4 years of devastating battles, the Union emerged victorious in 1865, ending slavery and restoring national unity. The federal government's authority grew stronger in the aftermath of the war. The late 19th century brought significant economic growth and industrialization, alongside advancements in infrastructure. In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the United States secured quick victories and, under the Treaty of Paris, gained territories including the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. At the dawn of the 20th century, World War I erupted. Initially neutral, the United States entered the conflict after repeated German attacks on American ships and attempts to incite Mexico against the U.S. The United States joined the Allies after entering World War I, which marked a significant turning point. The economy flourished in the years following the war, but this prosperity came to a halt with the onset of the Great Depression in 1929. This economic downturn not only devastated the United States, but also set the stage for the global turmoil that would lead to World War II. America's direct involvement in the Second World War began after the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan on December 7, 1941. The United States fought a distant but crucial war, both in Europe and the Pacific. Beyond combat, they supported their allies, including the Soviet Union, by providing essential supplies such as armored vehicles, equipment, and food. In the Pacific, American forces steadily advanced, winning key battles and inching closer to Japan's mainland. In Europe, after the D-Day invasion of Normandy in 1944, American troops played a significant role in defeating Nazi Germany. The war ended in 1945, with Germany surrendering in May and Japan following in September after atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the aftermath of the war, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as global superpowers, marking the beginning of a tense rivalry known as the Cold War. This era was defined by an arms race, propaganda battles, and indirect confrontations through proxy wars such as those in Korea and Vietnam. The primary goal of the United States during this time was to curb the spread of communism. Meanwhile, the 1960s brought waves of social change as the civil rights movement gained momentum, securing voting rights and greater freedoms for African Americans and other marginalized groups. The Cold War eventually ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. In the years that followed, the United States turned its attention to modern global challenges, particularly in the Middle East. The 21st century began with the tragic September 11, 2001, attacks orchestrated by Al-Qaeda, which led to prolonged military engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2008, the United States experienced its most severe economic crisis since the Great Depression, leaving a lasting impact on global markets. despite these challenges, the nation continues to play a central role in world affairs. The history of the United States is a story of resilience, transformation, and growth. From the earliest migrations across the icy land bridge of Beringia to the founding of a new nation, and from the challenges of war and economic upheavals to the ongoing pursuit of equality and innovation, the journey of this land and its people is nothing short of remarkable. As we reflect on the past, we gain a deeper understanding of how history shapes the present and guides the future. The lessons learned remind us of the power of unity, the importance of perseverance, and the value of standing up for what is right. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to explore more incredible stories that shaped our world. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.